The food you're eating may be worse than poison. Genetically modified organisms, or GMOs, are any organism who have had its genes changed, from yeast to corn to rabbits. These creations of modern science have more potential to do harm than good. Food products made from GMOs put people at risk with an unknown substance that has potentially catastrophic consequences. However, the FDA currently requires no labeling for genetically modified foods. To address this issue, foods containing ingredients whose genes have been altered need to have labels as such so consumers can make an informed decision. Further, a department that oversees enforcement of the proper labeling of foods needs to be established. These actions would give people the ability to make the right choices for the good of everyone. First, we will talk about the problems due to GMOs, then who is to blame for the lack of information on the labels, and finally what can be done to properly label GMO products.
To start off, GMOs are organisms that are altering the food process. The purpose of GMOs are to grow food faster and for food products to be more resistant to virus. Many foods are being processed at a faster rate, not getting its natural nutrients since food is being genetically altered and not properly labeled. These GMOs may harm people's health as in it can develop allergic reactions. According to a 2013 article written by an Institute for Responsible Technology staff says, numerous health problems increased after GMOs were introduced in 1996. The percentage of Americans with 3 or more chronic illnesses jumped from 7% to 13% in just 9 years. Food allergies skyrocketed and disorders such as autism, reproductive system, digestive problems, and others on the rise. What this staff is saying is that GMOs cause food allergies and disorders such as autism over the past years when GMOs were introduced. One can come up with the conclusion that GMO products are bad for one's health. Therefore, if people do not know what foods are being genetically modified, how do they know what foods not to eat? According to a March 30th, 2014 article by Mark Livshire, a writer of the Los Angeles Times mentions, proponents of labeling say they fear that eating such foods often made from genetically modified corn, soybeans, and sugar beets could also cause allergic reactions, asthma, and autoimmune deficits. Everything in this world has consequences, including genetically modified food. What Mark Livshire is saying is that many people believe genetically modified food causes health effects and therefore want food products containing GMOs to be labeled. Therefore, it is important for people that food labels with GMOs should be properly labeled.
Now that we have explained the problem of not properly labeling GMOs, we will now move to who is at fault. In the U.S., foods that are genetically modified, like the corn, are not labeled with the chemicals and organisms that were used to grow the specific product. The U.S. Food and Drug Administration has been ignoring the fact that these foods need to be labeled for people who want to know what they are consuming. According to a 2011 New York Times by Mark Bittman, Why Are GMO Foods Being Labeled? Says, what is unbelievable is that the FDA and the USDA will not require any of these products or foods containing them to be labeled as genetically engineered because they do not want to suggest or imply that these foods are different. The FDA is a health agency that is supposed to provide a healthy living for the United States, but how can they provide help when they are not able to provide the truth to the people of this country on what exactly farm growers are using? The U.S. over the years has created this belief that we are overly protected and that the youth and the citizens should always trust what the government says. But how can they not provide us with the simple truth? An article by Zach Calsbier on Organic Consumers Association called 5 Ways the FDA has failed consumers on genetically engineered foods claimed that the FDA has rejected labeling under the controversial argument that GE foods are substantially equivalent to their non-genetically engineered counterparts. The FDA cannot simply say that the naturally grown foods are just as the same as genetically grown foods because forcing something to grow is not the way nature intended things to be. If the FDA implies that the GE foods are just as good as natural ones, then why can't they simply show us? This worries many Americans because they fear that these foods will affect them and will slowly kill them from the moment they consume these products.
As citizens, we have the right to know what we are consuming on a daily basis. Having a history of fighting for what we believe in, we can only find an answer to our worries by providing a solution, by giving us the information that we need. The way we solve the problem is by labeling products that contain GMOs. However, in the LA Times article, Proposal Reignites Debate Over Labeling Genetically Modified Foods, written by Mark Leibscher, a business reporter from Sacramento, states that there is a bill that has been passed. Leibscher states that the Health Committee approved Senate Bill 1381 by Senator Noreen Evans, would require labeling of genetically engineered bulk and packaged foods beginning in 2016. A bill like this will be able to protect people's health. Like Richard Penn, an assemblyman and a doctor said, it would be about whether the local business and the health inspector have worked together to create a safe environment for the consumer. It does not matter what the businessmen want. The safety of the consumer is more important. If the consumer gets an allergic reaction or suffers a medical condition because the product they consumed was not labeled with GMOs, cause them to have that medical condition, then the consumer can sue the company. At the end of the day, labeling products with GMOs is beneficial for the businessmen and the public. We also want a law that would demand companies to put labels on food that contain GMOs. The next solution is for the government to form a department that will oversee the law is being correctly executed, just like the FDA oversees a substance or food that people take. The department will be responsible in making sure that the labels have the information the public needs to know. That information would be to notify if the product they are consuming has GMOs.
As we mentioned, the FDA does not require GMOs to be labeled, which will help consumers make educated choices about what they consume. This is why we are advocating for the government to establish a department to properly label genetically modified food. First, we talked about the problem of not labeling GMO products, then who is at fault, and lastly, who would help out, the labeling of food products. Next time you are eating, think about how your food is being altered and how it will affect your body now or in the future.